Richard and Nikki, thank you so much for joining me on the Charity Begins Here podcast. How are you guys doing?
Very well, thank you. Thank you very much for having us on. We do love a podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Kevin. Nice to see you again.
Pleasure is all mine. I really, really thank you. This segment for me is very, very new. And we were just talking a little bit off air how I realised recently that I really want to combine what I do in the world of entertainment and comedy with what I do with non-profits and charity. So yeah, it's a really, really big thank you to you guys for helping me make that happen. So I really do appreciate it. So I'd love to dive into the Tom Bowdidge Foundation. So guys, please tell me, how did it all start?
Back in 2012, Richard is an insurance broker. I was a primary school teacher, and Tom, our son, was 18, just about to go off to university. He'd been very poorly all year, and we had been several times to the GP, and we'd been told he'd got IBS, etc., etc. When suddenly on September the 4th at 12:03 precisely, I received the news. Richard was with him in hospital. I received the news that Tom has got an incurable and an inoperable cancer, which absolutely, well, literally did knock me off my feet. It's not something you expect to hear, especially when we've been fobbed off for so many months, that, this was nothing serious. This followed, I suppose, there followed several months of learning new language, discovering new skills, etc., and literally being by Tom's side as he faced the worst possible thing a youngster of that age could possibly face. Whilst he was poorly, it sort of started with his head shave. He said he felt that, if he was going to do this head shave and take control of what the cancer was doing to him, that he wanted to raise a few pounds. I think probably within half an hour, he'd raised £1,000 online. Yep. Gave him such a buzz to see all this money coming in. Yeah. And there started the beginning of the fundraising trail, really. He realised that actually he was in quite a powerful position, very poorly. All of this was done from his bed. I think he very rarely attended an actual event that he was organising from his bed because he was so ill throughout it. And he raised £170,000 for Teenage Cancer Trust.
Oh, wow.
But halfway through, or quite early on in his journey, he decided that he was not going to go to university anymore, that he felt he was learning his life skills facing cancer, and that he wanted to set up his own charity. It would be run by young cancer patients that were in remission, and that he felt that there were still areas that needed to be dealt with, that he would focus on, and he'd sort of cut out the middleman. Sadly, he didn't see the start of the Tom Bowdidge Youth Cancer Foundation because he passed away in the October 2013. But it wasn't many weeks after he'd passed that Richard and I decided that we would take on his legacy and we would fulfill his wishes. And we created and formed the Tom Bowdidge Youth Cancer Foundation.
And we launched it on his birthday, the 28th of February. And we started with an event at Jimmy's farm. And we thought we would raise a few pounds. And to set up a registered charity, you have to raise a minimum of £5,000 in the bank account to get your registered charity status. We did that on one night.
One night, wow.
Such was the legacy of Tom's vision and the passion that people had for supporting his vision and his dream.
I got it. He was quite a guy, wasn't he? He did a speech, if I remember rightly, at the Royal Albert Hall.
Yes, he did. He did it for a Mark Knopfler concert that was raising money for Teenage Cancer Trust. And he was told by his manager that he wasn't, he shouldn't speak for more than 2 minutes. And Tom was like, you should see the size of my speech. Not at all afraid of there were several thousand.
There were about 5,000, 6,000 people there. Something like that.
Actually, I think it was more. I think it was 7,000.
Yeah.
And well, not at all afraid of talking in front of them. And I said, well, why are you not frightened? And he said, because nobody can tell me that I'm wrong. I'm telling my story. And actually, I think that's what empowers us now as we go forward. People say, are you afraid? And I went, no, because we're telling our story. Nobody can tell us we've got it wrong. He had several standing ovations.
Seven standing ovations. including probably the biggest and loudest cheer when he talked about his trip to UCLH in a Blues and Twos ambulance. And he said, I've got no recollection of it, but I can tell you as morphine really messes with your brain. And he was obviously playing to an audience of adults that had grown up in the 60s. So some of that sort of possibly resonated with them. But he then sat down to another standing ovation about seven minutes after he started his speech. And then they reckon that was the biggest bucket collection they've ever had at one of their at a concert.
And Mark Knopfler, after Tom had died, so he didn't ever know this. After Tom had died, Mark Knopfler made a significant donation.
Five figures.
5 figures. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Because he was so moved by what Tom had said. And so there the charity was born. Wasn't many years into the charity that I realized that I could not carry on being a teacher. I couldn't give either being a teacher my 100% or running the charity. It was growing too fast. So something had to give. And one of my gorgeous little 5-year-old pupils turned around and she said, Mrs. Bowdidge, I know you're leaving, but you're now going to look after the bigger children. And that really helped me sort of hang up my hat, because I loved teaching. And it really did help me move on and think, yeah, now it's the turn of the big children. So yes, it was quite a journey, the start of.
Got it. And in terms of what your charity does, like, can you explain a bit more about how your charity does and how your experience with what Tom went through really influenced like how the charity is structured today?
Yeah, so Tom was very clear that there had to be 3 sections to the charity and what we did. A lot of charities will choose one arm of what we do. We took on all 3. So the first one that he was very, very conscious of was the fact that he quite often would have to go into the local hospital. He was very lucky. He was treated in UCLH in London, but he would have to go into the local hospital. And this meant that he either went on a ward of 8-year-olds or children, or older, our adults. And he said at 18, he didn't fit into either of those categories. He actually did still want mum or dad to be by his side, quite rightly. And, but he didn't need us on a children's ward. And obviously that wasn't available on the adult ward. So he wanted to make sure that we could get to as many hospitals, what they call shared care hospitals, where they take part care of your part share of the care that you have and work with the main hospital. And this sort of means that they're in a room that has Wi-Fi, because that was a real big problem for Tom. But the second is that the parent wouldn't be lying on the floor like Richard did on many occasions, sleeping on the floor under a chair.
You were sleeping on the floor? Really? Wow.
On a pile of blankets. If I was lucky, I got a broken recliner chair, but more often than not, it was a pile of blankets. And at one point, literally, I had my head underneath the visitor's chair in order for me to fit in Tom's room. Lovely staff, but unfortunately, just weren't geared for a youngster, a teenager, Tom's age, 18, whatever, to be treated for cancer. But lovely people.
I think as well, you don't, with a teenager, walk in at 6 o'clock to try and do their obs. It's just not on.
In the morning.
Somehow the teenage cancer wards, they know. They know the best time to contact the teenagers.
Lunchtime.
And it works well.
Yeah.
So that needed to be addressed. Their rooms needed to be bright. The rooms needed to give them hope. They needed to have smart televisions. They needed to have that bed, that chair that would turn into a bed, so that not necessarily a parent. Lots of these youngsters that, we're going up to 24, so they might be in long-term relationships, etc. They want their partner by their side. And why shouldn't they have their partner, right there? Whoever they needed, they could be right with them. So that was one area. We've managed 8 rooms across the country. If anyone knows about of a hospital that's desperately looking to improve their teenage services, do get in touch, because we're looking for a new project regarding that. The next one, which Tom was very lucky. We're in a very lucky position that we didn't sort of need any of these extra bits, but this actually is what's at the moment keeping me exceptionally busy. And this is the financial cost of a cancer diagnosis and the effect it has on the whole family. So at the moment, research is showing that a diagnosis for a youngster in a family is costing the family an extra £750 a month.
A month? Whoa.
Or the carers has had to stop work.
Yeah.
Not every employer is as wonderful as Richard's and mine were, in that they carry on paying them. And so suddenly, where's this money coming from? You've now got extra travel costs. A lot of people are doing 100 to 300 miles a day, sometimes to go backwards and forwards for their life-saving treatment. This isn't just going for, this is to keep them alive. So this is vital. Then you've got the additional food costs when you're in hospital. I'm afraid hospital food hasn't really changed. So you have got the additional hospital food. It may be that a parent has got to then stay in accommodation nearby. So all of those costs add up on top of their normal things. We know that fuel is extortionate at the moment. Then if they're at home for long periods, the cost of electricity suddenly, the cost of heating during our colder months, all of these things added onto this. Then you've got the chemo and the radiotherapy treatment that's affecting their weight, might be affecting their appetite. All of that then adds onto it. And suddenly you've got costs spiraling out of control. And I think the things that hit us most a few months ago, sort of in the winter, two young lads, completely different families, were weighing up, shall we eat this week or shall we pay for our travel to go to London and have our chemo? I mean, that isn't something anybody should be actually weighing up.
No.
It's just there. So we are there to cover all of those. Lots of people think we're a bit like a Make-A-Wish charity, and we're not. We are literally there to give them what you and I might take for granted. We do quite a lot of IT equipment so that they can carry on their studies, because they're very determined, these youngsters. They're absolutely sure they're going to get cured, and they want to carry on this bowling ball has smashed them, and they don't know where they're going. They need to keep hold of what their what their future is going to be, but they haven't got laptops, some haven't got phones even. So we're there to provide that too.
A lot of things that you would take, a lot of people would take for granted are critical for them, because they, as Nikki said, they have this passion for the future and this drive to carry on their life as normal as they possibly could. And there are simple things like an iPhone, like a laptop, the vast majority of us, we look around our own houses, we just take for granted. But when you've got, as Nikki said, a huge financial burden because of the additional costs of just getting to and from hospital or changes of body shape, etc., for clothing, an iPad and an iPhone can be just make the difference between their ability to carry on as normal as they possibly can with their contact with their friends or even their stuff.
That's great. I mean, it is so important to keep teenagers connected with phones and technology.
Sorry, given the final key aspect of it is the research side of it. If you look at the headlines of it, there's a very, very small percentage, if any, research funding into teenage and young adult cancers. And the problem is one, the teenage cancers tend to be rare and very aggressive. Tom's diagnosis was at the time the second recorded case in the UK of his type of cancer, a desmoplastic small round cell tumour, and only 200 recorded cases in the world. So if you are looking at the commercial aspect of it, cost benefit analysis of investing in research into a cancer like that, there's very little point. That's irrelevant. It's the emotional impact that's 200 children of a family, and obviously for us it was Tom. But the other side of it is because the cancers are rare and aggressive, the treatments have to be very, very aggressive as well. And when you've got 7 young people diagnosed every day, whether it be yesterday, today, or tomorrow, those all need treatment, and they all need an opportunity to be able to have a successful treatment. Tom's cancer didn't even have a drug protocol. He was treated with a different set of chemo because there was no protocol for his diagnosis. One of the drugs he was treated with was derived from mustard gas. So you sort of, you can get an idea of the kind of toxicity of these treatments. So Tom was very passionate about the idea that research needs to go into non-toxic or diagnosis treatments that allow cancer cells to be effectively tricked into thinking they're a different type of cell, which then stops the natural reaction of the body's immune system into attacking them, and the defensive mechanism of the cancer cells replicating, all that cycle that cancer goes through in terms of trying to effectively protect itself. And so one of our research projects, we're funding 2 at the moment, and they're looking at effectively turning cancer into a benign situation where you're effectively taking maintenance drugs, and it is then in abeyance, and it's not trying to replicate. And one of the researchers refers to what is a cancer cell. A cancer cell is a good cell turned bad, and if you can trick it back into thinking it's a good cell, you can then treat it differently, and you don't have to treat it with highly toxic poisons, basically. So that's a big passion of ours, is ultimately to create a treatment where it becomes a chronic disease rather than a toxic treatment.
And how do you go about refunding a research project? Like, do you have to like call certain universities? You call medical bodies? Like, how do you even start something like that?
They actually approached us. Our 2 major projects, yes, they approached us, and just recently we've been approached by another huge body where they know that we've had experience. They're very interested in what our story is. For example, they lost Tom's a sample. So they had, this opportunity to do biopsies on this sample and to work on it, and it got lost in transit between hospitals. And I said, when you have got so few of this particular disease coming through, how does something like that happen? And so we're very much used and spoken to about our experiences of it. We're very, very cautious. Whilst I'm not scientific, we know, we wouldn't dare fund something that looked like, well, if you take this tea bag this way. We know that we're working with very, very top quality professors, etc., that are very much at the top of their field, and that makes a difference, because, as I always say, it's not our money that we're using. We need to be absolutely sure that what we're doing is going into the right places. So yes, and of course, sadly, it's the most expensive arm of our work. That's where a large chunk of money goes, and many charities would just focus on our funding goes to research, but as I said earlier, we decided to focus on all 3.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, why not? Yeah.
But the unfortunate thing with research is there's no overnight sensation. The research funding we've been doing has been going for a number of years, and we'll have to carry on for a number of years, because once they sort of find, this is an interesting avenue to go down, theoretically it could be ultimately a dead end. But then also they might say, well, actually this drug is quite good at treating this. Why don't we try it in this scenario? And they can then go down a successful avenue that then leads on to more appropriate, more successful opportunities for them to create the treatments.
And are there any kind of like recent developments in like the cancer medical field that you're particularly excited about? I know like a few years ago, you're not in the cancer field, when like gene therapy came out, and there was a big breakthrough with MS. I remember dealing with a few charities back then, and there was a lot of excitement around gene therapy. Is there anything kind of coming up on the horizon? Any kind of anything at a trialing period that you're aware of?
They are. It's such a complex area. We have through some initial research work that we did, a paper was written on their findings, etc., which moves them to the next stage, and they move to sort of the next part of what they need to do. But it's such a long, drawn out process. And even at the end, should our researchers and scientists here find something, if the UK decide they're not going to fund it, if the pharmaceutical companies, etc., it could well go off to the US or something like that. It's not cut and dried that the UK would necessarily take on any findings that come here. All we know is little steps are made, and sort of, yes, as Richard said, they might go to a dead end. Right, let's not go that way. Lots of people ask us, are we close to a cure for this? And I think we have to just lose that for a minute. And it's about the fact that Tom, for example, had his treatment every 14 days. And for one of those days, in that 14-day period, he felt okay. But the other 13 days, he felt absolutely rubbish. And so it's about making sure that the treatment that these youngsters have doesn't make them feel so awful that they actually can't live the life. There are times when I think, would Tom have been better not having any treatment and living his last few months that he had, as well as he possibly could, because actually the 13 months he did live, there were very few days when he felt well. And so you sort of, it's about making sure that we can somehow treat them so that they can still live their life around that treatment. And teenage cancers, they are very aggressive. They are rare. And when I say the word rare, makes people think, oh, well, there's not that many. There are enough, there are absolutely enough of them for it. But because they're rare, not quite so much money is necessarily thrown at it as maybe we throw at our top 4 cancers that affect our elder generation, or indeed our youngsters, our children, 0 to 18. They don't, they can do okay as well, because so much money, but it's this middle group, the 18 to 24s. It is very much a lost generation. Their cancers are very different.
And I think one of the sort of the defining points that drives me, because the research fascinates me, is, again, one of our lead researchers, she referred to something called the lost opportunity. So you can get a lot of funding, as Nikki said, going into a lot of age-related cancers. And if you look at the average age of diagnosis of a teenage young adult, it's around about 16, 17. And if they've got a life expectancy of 85, Tom passed away at 19. If he's lost 64 years, 65, 66 years. And the thing, you think, what might he have achieved in that time? If I was a clever mathematician, I'd do what the GDP calculation would be. But if you just look at the lost opportunity, we will never know ever what Tom might have achieved. He might have been the next Einstein. He might have just been the next really, really good dad. We just don't know. And that's the lost opportunity that our professor, research professor, is very passionate about making sure everybody has the best opportunity.
That's great, and it really puts it into really clear context, Richard. And I'd love to just go back for a moment to Nikki, something you said about when you gave up your teaching job to run the charity full time. And I'd love to know, like in 2025, just how hard is it to run a nonprofit?
It's actually got harder. So when we started it back in 2014, my biggest fear was, how am I going to stand out amongst these bigger charities? Why are people going to give me their pennies and pounds, etc., against, the much larger charities that can pay out for all of this advertising, etc., etc. And we were very lucky. We got in with Sainsbury's for Partnership of the Year, and that really launched us. And it's funny, some of the staff said, oh my gosh, you're really different to other charities. And I think that's because we just were us. We were just us. We did things the way we thought they should be done, etc. We probably pushed boundaries that other charities wouldn't push, but we got away with it. So in the early days, yes, it was very good. We had a lot of support. Friends and family really got us off the ground, and fully supported us. And some of our early trustees sort of thought, well, what's that? When will you stop? What do you see as your ceiling? And I went, there is no ceiling. We go. And we sort of reached a plateau. And I said, no, this is when I need to now really, really up the game a bit. And of course, at that time, we sort of then hit the uncertainty of Brexit. That caused a major thing. COVID, which actually was probably some of our best years, because we were considered by all the authorities and government funding, etc., as one of the charities on the front line, because we were actually, teenagers still had to be in hospital having treatment. They were now even more alone and isolated because their parents couldn't be with them. So we were seen as a charity on the front line. So actually, we had some of our best years. First couple of years were incredible because so much funding was available to us. We also had an excellent corporate that really, really kept us going. I furloughed and quickly trained up even more so that I was fully sort of, making sure now I was really going at this with, proper charity understanding. And then, of course, we had the cost of living crisis, and that probably has been our hardest time ever, because whilst the cost of living crisis is affecting, our youngsters and our beneficiaries, because they've got even less money, they need us even more than they ever did. Guess what? Now our donors have got less money too. So that seesaw is just completely out of sync. And even people like corporates, they're not quite so freely, certainly in the early years of the cost of living, people were holding on to every penny that they had. Obviously, all charities are of such a necessity. They've all got something to give. Everybody wants your pound. How do you prove to that person holding that £1 that yours is more
important than somebody else's? Yeah.
And it just, yes, you just feel you're constantly knocking your head on a brick wall. My fundraiser said it's she'd been in fundraising for 17 years, and she said she has never, ever, ever known it to be as hard as it is. But we're working so hard, and actually last year wasn't too bad a year. We find everybody now is going for trusts and foundations, whereas before people didn't really need to, and now they're dipping in. So suddenly that's even harder. You hear just dramatic figures of how many thousands of applications they're receiving for just a few hundred, if that, grants that they've got to give out. And you're just sort of looking all the time to pivot. Where can we go for our next funding?
27.
And it's just very, really, really tough. I would say we are probably going through some of our hardest years ever.
And one of the challenges we also sometimes face is a bit of a catch-22 situation, Kevin, is the fact that because we're a small charity, but we have a national footprint, we might go for a funding application in somewhere like Cheshire, shall we say, and they say, "Oh, we'll only support a local charity." Yeah, but we are supporting people locally. But we're not actually don't have a branch, we don't have an office or whatever in that immediate vicinity. And then the other side sometimes is we are occasionally viewed as being a larger charity than we really are because of our national footprint, because we have a fantastic network of social workers. We have got that impact all over the country, but actually we are a very, very small charity. Just have a big impact around the country. So we sometimes sort of get stuck in this sort of no man's land between sort of our local impact and ability to source local funding where we're working, and the fact we're a local charity based in Colchester, and it's a frustrating thing, but we are getting sort of recognised, and we always find a great pleasure. Nikki said, called me through the other day. She said, "Oh, do you know so and so?" And I said, "No, don't recognise that name." "Oh, they've just given us £500 out of the blue. We don't know where, why, what drove it. There's nothing. It's just a transfer come into the bank. We have no idea." Or somebody that we don't really know or we know of, or don't even know at all, who volunteers to do a challenge event for us. That's great. That's really, really great. But it is so hard when you're marketing in a very, very crowded. It is a crowded space, and as Nikki said, every charity has a fantastic cause and a fantastic reason to be, and your precious pound is going to be sort of very preciously given, and that's the hard part.
And if someone wants to get in touch with you guys and maybe donate a random £500 that you don't know where it's come from, how can they do that?
Straight onto the website. It's the easiest way to do it. www.tombowdidgefoundation.org. And everything, yes, is on there. Even, I mean, some people might say, I've only got a little to give. Trust me, a little adds up, because if everybody gave a little, then you'd be amazed how much that adds up. And we have a fantastic monthly donation scheme where if somebody signs up for £5 or more a month, that you won't really notice, hopefully, going out of your
coffee.
It's right, give up a coffee a month. But you get a bag of bee bombs, and these turn into beautiful wildflowers, and the idea behind it is, one, save the bees, obviously, but also that as your flowers grow, it serves as a reminder that you actually are bringing a brighter future to some of these youngsters, and that your £5, along with so many other people's £5 every month, gives us we know what's coming in, we know how to plan using that, and before you know, at the end of the year, you've given £60, which if I said to somebody now, can you give me £60? No, I really can't. But could you afford to lose £5? Could you drop something that you maybe, is a pleasure? Could you drop that once a month and maybe donate it? And it is, it is amazing how much it quickly adds up. Everybody's pound is absolutely invaluable to us right now.
That's great. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. And anyone who wants to donate to the Tom Bowdidge Foundation, please look into the link that's on this video, and you will see a link directly to the website if you would like to donate. Guys, thank you so much again, and I wish you all the best with the charity.
Our pleasure, Kevin.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Great to see you.
All right, you too. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.